Happy Labor Day, everybody. The year 2020 is coming to a close within the next few months. Election Day is looming just 2 months away, and current events seem to be kind of stagnating this weekend. There's been a lot of talk about President Trump saying disparaging comments about the military, which are coming from an uncited source and, in my opinion, hold little to no validity. And I think most people who are supporters of the president agree, and I don't think it's going to sway the votes of anybody. If you're going to vote for Biden, you're going to vote regardless. If you're not going to vote at all, which you heard in the news from an uncited source isn't going to change your opinion about that. And so with that in mind, there's a couple of things I'm going to go ahead and touch on now, and some break from the norm, talking about the riots in Portland and everything that's going on. And I was in Portland the other day, and it's really dismal. It's a sad time. Good day to you all. Happy Labor Day, and what a wonderful weekend it is. It's been relatively slow news coverage. However, there has been discussions about President Trump making disparaging comments about the military and the armed forces that have come from an uncited source recently. Odds are this is probably going to have little to no effect on the voters, and this is typical 2 months out from the election type of coverage that you hear about, some typical mudslinging. And I don't really think that there's a lot of validity to these claims. However, they are making the news. Coverage of President Trump saying something disparaging about the armed forces, and a lot of people coming to his defense. A lot of people saying that they don't support the president. However, I don't think these comments had anything to do with that. I think they didn't support the president, and that's because of their own personal beliefs and their own personal opinions. And everyone's entitled to think the way they are. I just like people to be informed, and I think it's best to make informed decisions off of what you know. So with that in mind, I'm going to touch on a few other things that deviate from the chaos in the streets of America. I was in Portland a couple of days ago. It's rather dreary and dismal, and it's unfortunate what's happening. I hope they come to a peaceful resolution with the nightly terror that's taking place in the streets there, and hopefully they do that soon. Something interesting in the news today. Founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, made his first court appearance in London today on a hearing for extradition to the United States, with Assange's lawyers accusing charges against him for violating espionage and publishing secret military and diplomatic documents back in 2010 on WikiLeaks. The lawyers did believe that Mr. Assange has been framed, and it's a politically motivated attempt for the United States to extradite him back after he had been held in the London Ecuadorian embassy for the last 10 years. His asylum had been revoked. The charges came from a conspiracy that Assange had been coordinating with Chelsea Manning, a former Army intelligence analyst, of getting secured and secret information against the United States government posted online for public perusal. Manning was convicted on a court-martial in 2013 of leaking those files that created so much controversy involving Assange and WikiLeaks. They did hack into a Pentagon computer and began publishing secret documents, which is where all the information originated. The charges against Assange raise profound First Amendment issues, in the words of his attorneys in London, because the actions were actually difficult to distinguish in a legally meaningful manner for a number of reasons. Assange is in another country. He's a national, I believe, of Australia, and there had been multiple discussions between the Swedish government and the government of the United Kingdom on what to do with Assange, basically allowing the United States to form a case against him for espionage over the last 10 years. If he's convicted, Assange does face up to 175 years in prison, and he will be if found guilty, Assange would be subject to an unprecedented conviction based on historical American law. In other news, in Vanderburgh County, Indiana, Sheriff Dave Wedding told reporters that Democrats wanted to burn that thing every day, referring to an American flag, and he couldn't tolerate their opposition to the government and lawlessness. He was tired of seeing fire set in the streets, as he revealed to the Republican Party, for which Wedding has now officially switched. He was elected in 2014 and then again in 2018 as a Democrat, running as the county sheriff. He is now an official Republican. He spoke alongside Indiana Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch just the other day, saying it's interesting that we see this glorious flag here and the Democrats want to burn that thing every day, and that's part of the reason why I said I can't tolerate that. Burning our flag, the symbol of our country and our freedom, the greatest country in the world. He was even congratulated by Vice President Mike Pence, former Indiana governor, who took to social media praising Sheriff Wedding, saying, "Proud to welcome Sheriff Dave Wedding of Vanderburgh County and Sheriff Tom Latham of Posey County to the GOP. Under President Donald Trump, we stand for law and order, and we back the blue." Elected in 2014 and 2018, Vanderburgh County Sheriff Wedding is now officially a Republican. This angered the local community, who said in contrast, he's always pointed out that Republican-controlled Vanderburgh County and Indiana state legislature were responsible for the creation of budgetary restraints that made his job more difficult. Sore losers, the Democrats there. That's a real victory for Vanderburgh County, who I think is going to see law and order. And hopefully the lawlessness hasn't been too bad there. Meanwhile, in other lawlessness, we're talking about Seattle, Washington, who has a interesting case about potential civil rights violations. Seattle has been doing what they call racially motivated training. Seattle broke no laws while conducting racial justice training sessions for municipal employees. However, it was deemed by the federal government to be a potential violation of civil rights. And Seattle's training was a direct result of perceived racism in the workplace. The violation in question here is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits employment discrimination based on race, according to the Department of Justice. The DOJ's litigation section sent a letter out on the 26th of August to the Seattle City Attorney Pete Holmes, questioning a June training session that was meant to interrupt internalized racial superiority, as it was referred to, which was directed solely at white employees. The DOJ also asked about a parallel training that was meant to combat internalized racial inferiority. It was directed at employees of color, as they say, which I think is kind of a demeaning term to use against anyone. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin said in a quote, "This is a stunning illustration of the administration's warped priorities. During a nationwide reckoning with systemic racism and police violence, the administration is considering suing the city of Seattle for training we provide that specifically seeks to combat racism and advance equity," Durkin said in her Summer of Love. U.S. Office of Management and Budget recently began scrutinizing anti-racism training sessions for federal employees, and a memo was released Friday calling the training divisive anti-American propaganda. So again, priorities in the wrong place. That's my opinion. Moving on to something more stimulating. A recent book that I've been reading, Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind, which talks about the benefits of LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, mescaline, psychedelics, and the benefits to microdosing. And that's something that I've actually tried, but something that's piqued my curiosity and actually has me pretty interested. So some of the things that the book talks about, and then some of the other aspects of microdosing, taking small amounts of psychedelics to enhance the mind, to enhance the brain, to help cognitive ability, are worth looking into. And they're really, really worth taking consideration for people who may be dealing with depression, people who may be suffering from anxiety, people who may be chronically ill, who are facing death and have reservations about that. There are benefits to that. But to kind of touch on some of the things that are in the book, Pollan talks about Timothy Leary, an American psychologist and writer known for his strong advocacy of psychedelic drugs, and his opinions that kind of polarized a generation coming out in the early 1960s and being friends with a lot of the beat poets, Jack Kerouac and people of that era. Leary really kind of was a voice and a vision and a face of 60s pop culture and drug culture, a really, really intelligent guy. He may have done a few too many drugs and gone off the deep end, but his catchphrase of tune in, turn on, drop out became really big in the 60s. And he was polarized, ranging from bold oracle to publicity hound, known as a hero of American consciousness, according to Allen Ginsberg. And Tom Robbins called him a brave neuronaut. Aldous Huxley, also mentioned in the book, the English writer and philosopher, 19th and early 20th century author of The Doors of Perception and over 50 other books, was an early proponent for the benefits to the mind in the cognitive enhancement of psychedelic drugs. And it's notable that his book, The Doors of Perception, was also, as mentioned in 1991 movie The Doors by Oliver Stone, was the influence for the band The Doors name. And so some of the things that you might find beneficial in the use of psychedelics, if that's something that you're so inclined to study up on or even try, in microdosing. And microdosing is typically classified as using 100 micrograms, I believe. So microdosing psychedelic drugs can help with a variety of psychiatric conditions. A lot of people are using microdosing to treat anxiety, depression, PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorder, ADD, and ADHD. And I've even spoken to some friends who have used it to deal with depression and anxiety firsthand. So I've heard about the impact, the benefits, the effects. People are trying to microdose to do better performances at work, dealing with pain relief, studying for school homework, for programming, coding sessions that last all day. If you're into the IT world, Silicon Valley is no stranger to the use of psychedelics in small doses for enhancing concentration, improving creativity. It's also known to be helpful to microdose while working out, exercising, jogging, running, walking, playing various sports. It helps you focus and be aware of your surroundings, which is important for engaging in physical activities. The benefits of microdosing, it helps with cluster headaches or migraines. If people are suffering from that type of pain, the stimulation to the brain and the neurons will actually enhance the healing, essentially allowing the pain to have some benefit for relief. It does help, as I mentioned, with creative output for writers, musicians, artists, and as I mentioned earlier, in Silicon Valley, microdosing does help creative abilities. It helps you get into the zone and stay there. There's a recognition of the natural flow within ourselves, within our bodies, within our minds, and a connection to the earth around us. Microdosing does boost intelligence and understanding, and also means information gathering. If you're into research and you're doing a lot of reading and deciphering, microdosing, you're naturally more in tune with your mind, body, and your environment, and boring tasks no longer seem mundane for those who may be inclined to work in engineering. Microdosing helps physical energy, emotional balance, improves your well-being. It helps with a gained heightened spiritual awareness, but it also comes with a great sense of responsibility, knowing when to dose and when not to dose, not to overdose, not to go too high in your usage, and to be cognizant of the fact that if you are in a safety-sensitive type of profession where you're regularly drug tested, if you're on parole, if you're about to get hired, you're going to be screened, You don't want to be using any type of hallucinogen, psilocybin, mushrooms, LSD, whatever you may call it. It can be detectable in drug tests. It's traceable in urine for about 1 to 3 days. 80% of the active metabolites can be found. I have heard that you can actually test hair follicles, and it may show up much longer after that period of time. However, that's not a typical means of drug testing any longer, but it is still known to be used in some locations, in some places, for various reasons. And so that's a totally different topic to wrap this up with, but something that I found incredibly intriguing. With COVID, in the last 6 months, all of us have been confined to our homes. We've been dealing with a much different type of reality, whether it's working from home, whether it's being out of work. Domestic abuse has been, unfortunately, much worse with people not being out working and going to school. Drug abuse has been much worse with people being confined to the home, not working. And there's a lot of need for healing with all of the chaos going on in the streets and the cities and people getting sick. It's important now more than ever to take care of ourselves and to take care of the ones that we love, and to make sure that our mental, emotional, psychological well-being is in check. And so when we look at the benefits of microdosing, or something that could be a little off kilter, it may not be what we're typically used to hearing and dealing with, there are benefits to it. It just comes with responsibility, and it comes with a sense of purpose. What are you doing? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to fix? And what do you want to tap into? And so I hope that if you do try this, you try it responsibly. And as I mentioned, I have not tried it. I am reading about it. I'm researching about it. And I just like to share these insights. Thank you, everybody. Take great care of yourselves and have a wonderful Labor Day.